Hey, Troy Miller here with the Blue Ridge Breakdown. It is just about 10 a.m. on March 14th, 2025, as I'm recording this. Been a couple of weeks since I've recorded one of these. My apologies. To quote Robert Hunter, the lyricist for the Grateful Dead. Whoa, whoa, what I want to know is where does the time go? Um, I'm going to start saying what time I'm recording these because, man, between the time 10 a.m. when I started this and move on, who knows what could happen. We are in profoundly swift moving times. As I'm talking, there could be new tariffs being added. Uh, we're looking at the suppression of free speech. If you say something that the state doesn't, that the country, that the administration doesn't like, you can have your green card revoked and be arrested. They're working on all of the things that people have been warning about for years. They want to privatize Social Security. They want to privatize Medicare and Medicaid. They can say they don't want to do that, but there's no way to get to $880 billion in cuts as Congressman Riley Moore, our congressman here in the Northern District of West Virginia, has said, oh, we have to go after mandatory spending. And by mandatory spending, he does mean Medicaid, expansion programs, SNAP, WIC, Medicare, Social Security. There's no other way to understand that. It's a nice way of acting like, we're not just cutting benefits for seniors and people on disability and people who have young children who are under the income threshold. 1 out of 3 West Virginians, by the way, rely on Medicaid. 1 out of 4 West Virginians, or a little more than 1 out of 4 West Virginians, rely on Social Security receive Social Security as part of their earned benefits, whether it's through widowers insurance or disability insurance. Now this is the first one. I have a cat over here that just jumped up on the thing. We'll see if she joins us. But one of the things I keep on, I've been trying to think about what to riff on today, and I've been trying to think about what to riff on today for the last 2 weeks. And finally I sat down and saw somebody once again being, oh yeah, we need to cut all these things because we need to run government like a business. And it's a ridiculous thing. It's one of those buzzwords or one of those buzz phrases that sounds like a good idea, but like, you don't go to business school to learn how to run things like a business. Like, there's multiple types of businesses out there. There are some that have more inventory, some that are more capital intensive, some that are more labor intensive. Over time, what you see, especially like here in the coal fields, as I've talked about before, industries that are labor intensive and hire a lot of people will over time become capital intensive as those things are automated. That is because it is in the incentive of the capitalist class, the owner class, to do that, because people have lots of overheads. People have lots of variable costs. Machines tend to have more fixed costs, fewer variable costs. So that's just kind of, think about self-checkout at the grocery stores. And people can, the owners can complain all they want about, oh, self-checkout, people are stealing from us and all of this, but that's the cost that comes with trying to automate something where you used to have a human checker. That's the trade-off. So running government like a business doesn't make any sense on its front. What kind of business? I will tell you exactly what kind of business they are running this government like, both in West Virginia and the United States government. They are running it like a private equity hedge fund that is here to strip our states for assets and sell off everything that they can while pocketing all of the profits. What kind of business are they running us like? Think Sears. Think Toys R Us. Think Bed Bath & Beyond. These are businesses that lasted for a long time. And as soon as the hedge fund private equity people came in and started to fix things and run it more like a business, they destroyed these businesses. I mean, they got rich. That's their MO. That's what they do. When you apply that into the government, into the public sphere, what you end up with is you lay off a bunch of staff, you cut admin, so that the services, and they are services, not for-profit things for sale, right? The services get worse. Then the conservatives will come around and say, see, you're paying too much for these services anyway. We need to privatize it, right? You're not getting your bang for the buck for the roads, so we need to switch those over to toll roads. The foster system is broken in West Virginia. So what if we just started outsourcing that to, I'm guessing, whoever does it, the outsourcing for them in Oklahoma, since that's where Patrick Morrissey brought our czar of the foster child system in West Virginia over from. Likewise, the ways that I can't think of her name right now. They brought her up from Florida's Department of Education up here to West Virginia to fix the public schools. I don't know if Florida public schools are any sort of model. No offense meant to any students in those programs or any of the teachers who are doing the best they can, considering how Florida has been used as, I've used this phrase before and I'll continue to use it, a laboratory for autocracy. The simple fact is, though, that government isn't a business. The Postal Service isn't there to make profits. Amtrak isn't there to make profits. They're there to provide services at cost. And what ends up happening as you scale those up, when you have those services for businesses and for consumers and for people and citizens to use those things, is you get lots of knock-on effects in the economy. I guess I'll take this moment to talk about my theory of what I think Trump and Musk's economics theory actually is, which comes down to, I think, the divider principle, the divider effect. And why I say that is because there's this economic principle about the multiplier effect related to the velocity of money, which is how fast a dollar conceptually or physically goes around in the economy before it gets, from a bank back to the Federal Reserve. How fast that happens, how many times around it goes in a certain period is called the velocity of money. In a economy like we've had for the last few years, that money has been going around pretty damn fast. And that money has been having knock-on effects all through our economies. An example I'll use is if you raise the minimum wage in an area, right? Now, what people will say is, if you raise the minimum wage, the price of everything will go up. And research just doesn't bear that out. 100+ years of studying the minimum wage, that's not what happened. It seems like one of those things that makes, the input costs of everything goes up. So of course everything goes up. And so the minimum wage increase would be canceled out by the price of inflation. It just doesn't happen. Fast food places didn't close in California after they raised their fast food prices. But you raise the minimum wage and now you have a family that maybe that extra $50 a week gives them the ability to pay for a babysitter that they couldn't afford before to go out for dinner. Okay, so now the babysitter's getting money that they weren't getting before. The restaurant's getting money that they weren't getting before. If they tip the waiters with some of that extra money, okay, now that money's going further in the economy. Now you have a babysitter, you have restaurant staff, you have the waiters, you have, if you took an Uber or a Lyft there, all of these people have more money in their pockets because of that first wage increase. You don't even have to raise the minimum wage. Somebody gets a bonus in their work. So that's how the multiplier effect of money works. And it's really, you could do a week or 2 weeks of lectures in economics on these principles and really studying them out. But those are the kind of basics. And if somebody wants to say I'm stupid and I'm wrong and I'm misunderstanding that, please go ahead in the comments. I look forward to the discussion. So what happens the opposite of that? You start cutting money out of the economy. You start firing people en masse. You start cutting contracts for billions of dollars of food that goes directly to people who don't have capital to afford that food otherwise. Well, all of it starts grinding to a halt. You cut GDP by more than whatever the cuts are to balance the budget that they're going for, which they're not balancing the budget. They're just moving the money around to themselves. And I have this issue I've been thinking about because we've heard for 4 or 5 years now that the um, stimulus checks during the pandemic were inflationary, and that's why the price of everything went up. It had nothing to do with supply chain bottlenecks. It had nothing to do with sellers inflation, where there's this sort of libertarian free market mantra where they go, "Oh well, seller or prices aren't set; they're discovered." Oh yeah, that sounds really smart. And the invisible hand just sets these prices. Well, yeah, except for the corporations actually set the prices. And what they discover a lot of the time is if they charge more on inelastic goods that people need for all sorts of things that there aren't a lot of substitutes for, or the substitutes aren't familiar to people, right? Like eggs. You make more money if you raise the price more and the same amount of people have to buy it. Wow, what a price discovery that is if you're the executive setting the prices, right? I don't buy it when people are like, "Well, the prices are just discovered." Yeah, in highly competitive markets, in highly localized markets, yes, right. You can see when gas stations are jockeying for the lowest price right across the street from each other, but that's because there's a clear substitute. The transition costs, the transaction costs, um, are very low to go to the cheaper one. And so they will cut into their own profits at the gas station, but that has nothing to do about the way the oil price is being set. And we know that the oil executives have basically admitted that they were running a cartel. I mean, they always have been running a cartel. Inflation in the 70s, in my opinion, was largely driven by a cartel that controlled the price of the inputs of everything with oil and gas. I think that's what we saw partially in the last 5 years too, and we know that because certain executives have talked to each other in recordings that have been released to say, "Yeah, we are going to choke our supply to raise prices." So that's how that works. But they want us to believe that the $600 checks that went out to millions of people in the U.S. are what drove inflation more and more. But they don't want us to believe, and this is where I've started really like, well, which is it, right? Um, the money in tax breaks to billionaires, they don't think that's inflationary, right? Now, why is that? I'd say they could have a point because all of that money is not getting reinvested into the economy. It's really waste. I mean, billions and billions of dollars of waste going to profits to these people. Um, and the money either stops in their accounts, which would then mean they're liars about, "Oh, well, we're so important because all of this money, we're not actually this rich. All of this money is locked up in the economy or is reinvested or is hiring all these people and all that." Okay, well, if that were true, then the amount of money that Elon Musk has and spends on all of these things and the tax breaks that he's trying to shovel himself would be inflationary. Just as much so as the stimulus checks, the $600 stimulus checks to working Americans. It's just all going to one person. Or the other option is it's not inflationary because that's where the money goes to die. Or there's another option, which is actually spending, or just volume of spending in the economy isn't as tied to inflation as people would like us to, as some would like us to believe, because there's such economic power concentration that the firms in control, the eggs firms, the pharma firms, all of these, the firms, not people, they are not people. The firms that have the monopolies have such power that they can set the price at whatever they will, which is why people die every year, because they can't afford the pharmaceutical price, the pharmaceutical drug prices that for whatever select drugs that are necessary for an autoimmune disorder or whatever. People can't afford the price increases on those. So they die. That's the free market at work. People in control of selling products can set the price at whatever they want. And the people who need those products and don't have any substitutes for those products can pay the price or die. Which is a nice transition to this Otto von Bismarck speech that I go back to a lot, and I think I've paraphrased a few times. This particular copy of excerpt is from a book called Forging an Empire, Bismarckian Germany, 1866 to 1890. It's titled Bismarck's Reichstag Speech on the Law for Workmen's Compensation on March 15th, 1884. That was an accidental thing. I should act like I meant to do that. So if you're watching this on March 15th, 1884, or March 15th, 2025, this is words from 130, 140 years ago, 139, 141 years ago. And what it makes clear to me, this is when Bismarck is making the case for the German parliament about why to pass the world's worst workers' compensation laws. And they're getting pushback from the conservatives in the parliament. And I think this is about the third time he's come back to say, we got to do this. And so I'm just going to kind of jump in because this is in sections, and I'll post a link to the whole speech in the thing. The real question is whether the state, and Bismarck says, by state, I always mean the German Empire, whether the state has the right to abandon to chance the performance of a responsibility of the state, namely, to protect the worker from accidents and need when he is injured or becomes old, so that private companies form that charge premiums from the workers and the employers at whatever rates the market will bear. As soon as the state concerns itself with these matters at all, however, and I believe that it is the state's duty to concern itself, it must strive for the least expensive form and must take no advantage from it, and above all, not lose sight of the benefit for the poor and the needy. Otherwise, one could indeed relinquish the fulfillment of certain state duties, such as, among other things, the care of the poor, in the widest sense of the word, as well as schools and national defense, to private stock companies. In the same way, one can continue to believe that the whole of the state's responsibility must in the end be left to the voluntary formation of private stock companies. The whole problem is rooted in the question, does the state have the responsibility to care for its helpless fellow citizens, or does it not? I maintain that it does have this duty, and to be sure, not simply the Christian state, as I once permitted myself to allude to with the words practical Christianity, but rather every state by its very nature. It would be madness for a corporate body or a collectivity to take charge of those objectives that the individual can accomplish. Those goals that the community can fulfill with justice and profit should be relinquished to the community. There are objectives that only the state in its totality can fulfill. Among the last mentioned objectives of the state belong national defense and the general system of transportation. I'd consider that the U.S. Postal Service and Amtrak. To these belong also the help of persons in distress and the prevention of such justified complaints as in fact provide excellent material for exploitation by the Social Democrats. That is the responsibility of the state from which the state will not be able to withdraw in the long run. He continues, and once again, this is Bismarck. He's the emperor. He's not a liberal. And he's actually putting this out in contrast to the Social Democrats because of the rise of trade unionism, communism, socialism, all distinct from one another, despite what right-wingers may have you believe today. And for the right-wingers who are like, we're a Christian nationalist state, again, this is Bismarck. This is the German nationalist, the European Christian. He used the phrase, this is our inheritance of European Christianity, not whatever Milton Friedman and von Mises promoted in the 20th century to try to beat back against what had actually been accomplished in the German Empire in the 19th century. Bismarck continues, if one argues against my position that this is socialism, then I do not fear that at all. The question is, where do the justifiable limits of state socialism lie? Without such a boundary, we could not manage our affairs. Each law for poor relief is socialism. There are states that distance themselves so far from socialism that poor laws do not exist at all. I remind you of France. And at this time, France is going through just like another cholera outbreak. It's a hard right-wing sort of governance. I'm no expert on French history, but this is my understanding. Um, from these conditions in France, the theories of the remarkable social politician Léon say, whom Herr Bramberger referred to, are quite naturally accounted for. And this is one of my favorite lines in like any speech. This man expresses the French view that every French citizen has the right to starve and that the state has no responsibility to hinder him in the exercise of this right. That is the modern conservative position in America. Um, there's a few more lines in here I want to read before I, because it says the libertarian mindset of the 20th century and the 21st century is so, there's a reason why classical liberalism eventually developed into basically Keynesianism in many ways. But Bismarck continues. According to my experience, everyone understands by freedom only the freedom for oneself and not for others, as well as the responsibility of others to refrain absolutely from any limitation of one's own freedom. In short, by freedom, they actually mean domination. By freedom of speech, they understand the domination of the speaker. By freedom of the press, the predominant and preponderant influence of editorial offices and of newspapers. Indeed, gentlemen, I am not speaking here in confessional terms. In all confessions, by freedom of the church, the domination of the priests is very frequently understood. I have no desire to speak of human weakness, but rather of the human custom which establishes the importance of the individual person, the dominance of individual persons, and their influence over the general public, precisely on the pretext that freedom demands it. This is indeed more strikingly realized in our own history in Germany than in any other. In the centuries of the decay of the German Empire, German freedom was always sharply accentuated. You could substitute, in the decades of decay of the United States New Deal post-war system, freedom was always sharply accentuated. What did this mean? The freedom of the princes from the emperor and the power of the nobles over the serfs. They wanted for their part to be free. That means to be free was for them and also for others identical with the concept to dominate. They did not feel themselves free unless they dominated. Therefore, whenever I read the word free before another adjective, I become very suspicious. Yeah, me too. Liberty is one that gets beat up around in the United States context a lot, but Elon Musk, when he demands free speech, he demands that he owns the platform and can ban whoever for whatever reason. He will suffocate the discourse. He will sue to make sure that all publicity is actually good publicity for him. Donald Trump, this is the ethos of this man. And for context, I discovered this speech while I was helping Tom Hartman write The Hidden History of American Healthcare. It's called, I think the subtitle is something why America's healthcare system makes some very rich and kills the poor, or something to that effect. A really good book. I'm very proud of my contributions to that. It is very much was in my wheelhouse. But when I discovered that speech, it lives rent free in my head, as the kids say these days. This man expresses the French position that every French citizen has the right to starve and that the state has no responsibility to hinder him in the exercise of this right. That's what Doge is doing. That's what they mean by when they're talking about efficiency. They're not talking about efficiency of delivering the goods. Bismarck was. I don't agree with everything in that speech, but the general sense there, I just really think perhaps let's see if I can find that quickly here. He talks about the state even further. Well, I don't want to take too long looking for this while you're all watching and listening, but maybe I'll highlight it in the text down below. They want a free market, which means they want enough money and enough economic power that they control the terms of the market. They want free and fair elections, which means they want to make sure that you have to pay a poll tax for voter ID. And you could say, oh, that's awful extreme, Troy, but it's not a poll tax. Yeah, it sure as hell is. If you have to pay for an ID, if it's not provided for free for you, for every citizen eligible to vote, maybe through automatic voter registration, if those things aren't being fulfilled, then requiring photo ID that costs money, that's a poll tax. I guess I'm running towards the end of the natural flow of thoughts here, but just to sum it up, is these are what the Democrats have been proposing, the Economic Bill of Rights. This is not socialism. Just like the workers' compensation plan in Germany in the 1884 was not socialism, but it is a bulwark against socialism. If people are really afraid of the rise of communism and socialism, then we need to make sure that this system that we have right here, which I would call, and I think my friends on the right, some of them agree, corporatism, crony capitalism. They use these phrases only when they're talking about businesses. They don't specific, like, oh, George Soros is a crony capitalist. Oh, Mark Zuckerberg is a crony capitalist. Yes, you know what? They are, but the problem is not that they are left-wing crony capitalists. There's no such thing. The problem is that they're crony capitalists. Their entire thing is to make money. That's what they do. I am of the mind that most profit that exists, where they go, this is the net profit we have for all of this year, that is economic waste. That is money that's not going to higher wages. That is money that's not going to innovation. That is money that's not going to marketing even. That's money that's being sucked out of the economy in the form of profits and waste. And it's making people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and the United Healthcare CEOs and everybody else richer and richer. And either that's inflationary because they have all this money, or it's waste because that money goes there to die in the economy, which brings me back to the divisor effect. But you know what actually happens when that money goes to die in their accounts? That money represents real political power. Because starting back with First Bank versus Bilotti in the 70s, and then up through recently McCutcheon and Citizens United, we have allowed absolutely unlimited bribery in our political system. And so when you allow unlimited political bribery into the system, you then open up the political system to be absolutely subverted by the economic system. And all of this has been set up because they've ginned up fear over 90 years since the New Deal that Social Security is actually communism. It's the backdoor to communism. Medicare is the backdoor to communism. No, you know what they are? They are universal programs that are the most popular programs in the history of America. You know where the waste is in Medicare? How did he put it? How did Bismarck put it? Yeah, the waste is private companies form that charge premiums from the workers and the employers at whatever rates the market will bear, except for they don't have to deal with the market because they're overcharging Medicare. That's where the fraud is with Medicare. It's with the Medicare Advantage plans unchecked and everything. That's where that fraud is. You know where the fraud is in Social Security? Or I guess the abuse is in Social Security? It's Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and all of these other billionaires, the hundreds of them in America, not paying in a cent on Social Security after basically the first day of the year because they're so rich, because they make so much money off of the money they already have that they stop paying in at the rate that you and I are paying in right now. That's where the abuse is in Social Security, because 99.7%, 99.7 cents out of every dollar that Social Security collects is paid out in the form of benefits or goes directly to the administration of the program which has never missed a payment in its entire history, a program that has kept seniors out of poverty since its inception, a program that, just 15 years ago, I guess a little more than that, back in 2007, 2008, was a lifeline for people who had put so much of their savings into a 401k. And I'll say it again, a 401k is not a substitute for Social Security, and Social Security is not a substitute for a 401k. You can outlive your savings in a 401k or any other account. You can outlive the money in your mattress, but you cannot outlive your Social Security. And, if there's one thing I'm going to end this with right now, because I could just keep on going on and on and on and on, it's hands off our Social Security, and keep us tuned to this space as we stand up and fight back and fight for what is our earned benefits here. And I'll say it again, and I've said it, but we are not saving this country from above. I'm sorry to say that the Democrats at the national level are not doing what needs to be done to fight back. And largely, it's our job to define what the Democratic Party is for them, because they are awful at it. The leadership of the Democratic Party has failed in presenting a vision that is counter to fascism, is anything less than, oh, you know what? Let the corporations run the entire economy and the political system, but maybe we should let them do it a little less than the Republicans say they want. And was it Harry Truman who said between a Republican light and an actual Republican, people are choosing the actual Republican? The example I use, and I apologize to listeners who may be allergic to caffeine or something, but pretty much anyone given the choice between caffeine-free Coke and actual Coke is going to choose actual Coke. Coca-Cola, not cocaine. But you see my point. Democrats, and now this is the third time I'm saying I'm ending this, Democrats need to embrace the Economic Bill of Rights as laid out in both West Virginia's Democratic Party platform and what we adopted from Professor Harvey Kaye and Alan Minsky with Progressive Democrats of America, their drafts of an updated Economic Bill of Rights for the 21st century. The Democrats need to get on board with this right the hell now. Yesterday, 6 months ago, I'm tired of I saw one of these Democratic influencers post this thing about, can't we just raise taxes on billionaires instead of starting a trade war or something to that effect? And Mark Cuban, of all people, was like, yeah, you can do, yes. And it's like, well, 6 months ago is when the messaging was for that. But instead, we had people running around out there going, no, we're not going to tax wealth. That's unpopular. Yeah, taxing the wealth of people with over $100 million is unpopular? With whom? The people who have more than $100 million in wealth? You are in the top 10% of this country if you have over $2 million in wealth as of 2022. This is a chart I just saw yesterday. So if you have 50 times that amount in wealth, I think you can pay taxes on it. And frankly, I found it very unconvincing. They're like, this will destroy the rich people and our wealth and everything. And it's like, you're so rich and you're so smart. You're so smart that you got so rich, but you can't afford a lawyer to help you evade these taxes again? Wow, sorry. By the way, if you want to go back to government efficiency and you want to simplify the tax code, let's go back to the 1950s, 1960s, pre-Reagan tax codes where the pages were very short. The highest earners were taxed very high. And part of the problem was there were a lot of loopholes. Close those loopholes, go back to a simpler tax thing. And frankly, I think we could structure a tax system where what representative was it that just came out and said, nobody who earns under $150,000 will have to pay any taxes under Trump's plan. First of all, that's bullshit. They haven't presented that plan. But second of all, great. That's a great idea. How are you going to do it? You can't do it by just cutting grandma's Social Security check. Hands off our Social Security, hands off our Medicare, hands off our SNAP, hands off our WIC, hands off our earned benefits. and pay your damn fair share. Seniors aren't the leeches in America. Elon Musk is the leech in America. Thank you all for tuning in. That's just about a half hour of content. I'll drop the speech in here, and if there's any other research that I mentioned or anything like that, I'll try to drop that in there too. But I really want to get this out the door because it's been a few weeks since I got a podcast or a video like this out the door. So as always, thank you so much for listening. Spread the word. Yeah, it's worked up today. I hope you take that, and I hope it equips someone with one more thing to say to their friends. And let's remember, we cannot do this inside our own bubble. We cannot win this with Democrats alone. We cannot win this with progressives alone. What we Democrats need to do is to present a story, the Economic Bill of Rights, that is inclusive of everyone. And the only people who will oppose an economic bill of rights are people who are, ideologically opposed to positive rights, people who think that the state is just there to help or to stay out of the way of the citizen who has every right to starve. Yeah, those people who think that that's the role of the state, is not to hinder people's right to starve, they'll oppose the economic bill of rights. And the ultra rich and corporations, and to paraphrase FDR, I welcome their hatred. But for you, pretty much any listener of this program, any watcher of this program, the economic bill of rights is for all of us, even people who politically disagree with us. But we need to put the vision forth boldly. We need people to start coming together and identifying legislation that helps bring about the Economic Bill of Rights, helps manifest the Economic Bill of Rights. I'm waiting still for one of these good billionaires that we have, like Mark Cuban or George Soros or somebody, to fund the opposite of the American Legislative Exchange Council, so that we can have our own national program or national think tank that just generates legislation that helps state legislators manifest the Economic Bill of Rights in their own state houses. We need to be equipping our future leaders or current leaders with more than they have right now. I'm really sick of this whole the Democrats can't really do anything because they don't have control over anything. They just need a couple of our votes. And then the Republicans are like, the Democrats are shutting down the government. And it's like, I don't know how the party with no control over anything can shut down the government. The Republicans don't really get blamed for that type of thing when they're in the minority party. And I saw somebody point out, it is very frustrating that Chuck Schumer apparently believes that the filibuster means that Democrats can't do anything when they have the majority, but it also doesn't allow the Democrats to stop anything when they're in the minority. That's mind-boggling. But then even more mind-boggling is this attitude from certain pundits that say, well, the only thing to do is to win the next election. Okay, well, where are these candidates coming from, and what's their vision? Is it just Trump bad? Because the problem is, we tried that for 8 years now. And enough of the country doesn't buy it that it's not going to, what? Elon Musk bad. Okay, so you try that once? Come on, put forward a vision. Thank you so much for tuning in. I could just keep on ranting in circles at the various groups, I guess, and it's billionaires and feckless Democratic consultants who are paid too much are number one on my list of people who should shut up and get out of the way so that we can build the society that America's promised and has always fallen short of. But we get closer and we get better. And then, over 80 years, the oligarchs and the billionaires and their lackeys, whether it's from the American Revolution to the Civil War, or the founding of the U.S. Republic and the Constitution being adopted, to the Civil War, roughly about 80 years of uh, oligarchs pushing back against the American experiment, from the failure of Reconstruction to the New Deal, roughly another 80 years or so of oligarchs and un American Confederates pushing back and chipping away at the progress until the Great Depression. Then we get the New Deal. Once again, that's we are able to push back and put in check the political power of the economic royalists, the morbidly or mortally rich, however we want to call them. And they spent 80 years chipping away at it and poisoning the American consciousness to have us believe that Social Security is somehow bankrupting this country, even though Ronald Reagan knew as well as I, and I hope you, um, Social Security is entirely paid for out of payroll taxes and doesn't contribute 1 cent to the national debt. And you cannot balance the national debt on Social Security because it is entirely self-funded from payroll taxes. So, thanks so much for tuning in. Remember to like and share, comment down below. Um, you know, what do you think? Catch you next time.